Hi, I'm Phil Clendenin with Yamaha, and I'm here at Sam Ash to show you a little bit about the new Reface. This is a reimagination of some classic Yamaha keyboards. And one of the things that we really find compelling is that these can go anywhere. These are mobile mini keyboards. And the only thing mini about them is the size, because the sound is huge. And as we'll see, we have 4 different models. Each one is very in-depth. And we'll take a look at each of these one by one. Okay, let's take a look at the Reface CS. Now, CS is short for Control Synthesizer. Now, back in 1976, now, Yamaha's been making synthesizers now for 40 years. This is our 40th anniversary of making synthesizers. And that's one of the reasons that we're doing this reimagination of the interface with keyboards. Back in the day when analog synthesizers roamed the earth, 100% of the customer base were programmers. And it was a smaller market back then because it took a lot of, well, I don't know, you had to have that kind of a mind that enjoyed digging in, rolling your sleeves up, and learning how to do something. Well, we're reimagining this now. We know that today it's instant gratification, and the preset, actually being able to push a button and recall all your settings, actually allowed the market to grow a lot further. And we'll get to that in a minute. But back in the analog days, you had really basically 2 sounds you made with an analog synthesizer. If it was in the upper region of the keyboard, it was called a lead sound. And if you played in the lower range, it was called a bass. That was basically it. You know, the book might have said, set the settings like this and it'll be a flute. But not so much. I mean, you have to really have a good imagination. All right, but the thing about analog synthesizers were they weren't trying to be anything else. They were making their own sounds for their own sake, and there's something very endearing about that, and something very realistic and real-time about it. And that's what this interface is about. Now, my very first analog synthesizer, which I bought at Sam Ash 40 years ago, quite coincidentally. This is long before I worked in the music industry. I was just a musician, just a kid. And I bought a analog synthesizer, and it had 2 waveforms, as I recall, a sawtooth and a square wave. Now, if those are strange to you, you'll learn about those, because you can build all types of sounds from these geometric wave shapes. Now, here we have 5 source waves. And I'll read them off to you. You have what's called a sawtooth wave, and it's a multi-saw wave. You have a pulse wave, which can be square or do pulse width modulation. You have oscillator sync, where you can sync the oscillators where the pitch of one influences the other. You have ring modulation, and you can do FM, which is frequency modulation. This allows you to do things like generate noise and, of course, do complex tones from FM, frequency modulation. It also has built in a looper. A looper allows you to record a phrase and have it play back as you alter the sound. Now, this is a full-fledged analog synthesizer, or a virtual analog synthesizer. So we're listening now to a sawtooth wave. I can add texture to that wave. It's all about sound creation. And I can modulate that wave. Now, as a musician, you start learning these things. Now, some of the terms may be technical to you, all right? Pulse width modulation or pitch modulation depth. There are musical terms for all of this. Don't let this intimidate you at all. As a musician, there are basically 3 things you do. You practice to play the correct pitch. You practice to play at the correct tone with the correct tone. And you practice to play at the correct volume. Unless you're a guitar player where you just ignore that and just play as loud as you can. All right. I pick on guitar players, I'm sorry. All right, but there's pitch, there's tone, and there's loudness. And these are the things that you're going to adjust here. When you modulate the pitch, when I say pitch modulation depth, musicians call that vibrato. Now that's a term that's friendly to musicians. You understand what that is. You're picturing a violin player or a guitar player wiggling their left hand on the string, shortening and lengthening the string that they're playing. Pitch modulation, all right? Filter modulation, all right, you may not know what that is, but filter modulation is called wah-wah. Now, you may think that that is a pedal that was invented for guitar players, but long before guitar players had a wah-wah pedal, some trumpet player or trombone player somewhere got a bathroom plunger, and that's a wah-wah, all right? You're changing the timbre of the sound in some kind of a rhythmic fashion. So, filter modulation. Then you have something called loudness modulation or amplitude modulation. And that's where tremolo comes in. We talked about that previously on the CP. Tremolo is where you alter the volume rhythmically. So these are musical terms. Programming a synthesizer is not difficult. It's really music, and you have all the information you really need already. You just have to connect the dots. So by adding pitch modulation, I can get that kind of thing. Filter modulation, it gives me a wah-wah. And amplitude modulation alters the volume. You can hear it go through the harmonic series there. Ring modulation is where you hear the pitches beating against each other. You can get all kinds of bell tones. And then, of course, FM is where one frequency, well, you have an FM radio, if you ever figured out how that works. You have one signal that carries what you hear, and you have a modulator that changes the character of what you hear. So this is filter modulation. Now on board you get, of course, effect processing. Now back in the day, the analog synthesizers and effects were two separate things. But again, this is a reimagination of the interface for an analog synthesizer. So you have here distortion, you have a chorus, a flanger, a phase shifter, you have delay. Now this is an 8-note polyphonic synthesizer. Of course, you can make it gloriously monophonic. Monophonic allows you to play one note, and the behavior is different. And of course, you can do things like portamento, the ability to slide between notes. All right? So, it's all about synthesis. It's all about real time. Now, the one thing that happened when back in the analog days, you came up with a great sound, and hopefully you were recording it at the time, because once you moved the thing, it was gone. All right? We have an app. You'll be able to connect your Reface, this is true of all of them, to an iDevice, like an iPad or a tablet, and be able to capture your sound. So in other words, this will send a message, it will capture all of the settings, and then you can return it. And one of the things that we're going to introduce with all of the Refaces is a community of users. Because we realize, you know, the millennial generation has missed out on a lot of the fun we used to have back in the day creating your own sounds. All right? We're going to have something called Sound Mondo, which is going to allow you to share your sounds. You can connect any one of these Refaces to your browser. Your browser will capture actually the front panel of your unit, and show you what your sound looks like. Now, you can make a QR code, or you can just capture that sound and email it to your friends, post it on a website. We, of course, have YamahaSynth.com, and you have all kinds of people exchanging sounds. So this is getting ready to be a lot of fun. If you're involved or want to get involved in music, and these things can go anywhere. You can take them to the beach. They run on batteries. You can walk around with them. This is like a electronic musician's acoustic guitar. If you're a keyboard player, you're always tied to some kind of a plug-in. You have to get some electricity. Well, you can run these on 6 AA batteries, take them anywhere with you, and have all the fun. And you can capture your sounds. We're not going to leave you out in the cold. We recognize that going back and looking back is great, but there are some things that we realize we really wish we had. There were some sounds that I made on an ancient Mini Moog that I wish I could recreate, but it was a once-in-a-lifetime kind of thing. Here, you come up with a great sound, you can capture it. That's the whole thing. The program is called Capture. The Reface CS, there's nothing like it. A reimagination of analog synthesis.